got a lot of refinances going on right now. Purchases are definitely lower than where they normally are.
Yeah.
But I mean, I had a client this week again get in contract, and they said that they think that they, probably one of the big reasons they got into contract is because of this. Like, they had been beat out on other properties.
Yeah.
But then I actually had a borrower that got pre-approved yesterday. Had a really good conversation with them. Just got an email in the day and saying they're going to wait. They're going to wait until they get through this pandemic a little bit.
Okay.
And so it's interesting, man. It's an interesting variation of what we're getting with people. What's up, Levi?
How you doing, man?
What's up, man? Is that a home haircut?
It is.
What if it wasn't? What if it wasn't? Didn't we?
Like that?
It's a great haircut, dude. I wasn't saying that. I'm just saying, like, it's short, it's high and tight, and well, I haven't had a cut for a while. So, what's crazy is you can see the gray so much more now when the hair is a little bit longer than it normally is.
That's why I'm keeping a close shave too. The beard is gone quicker than the top of the head.
That's awesome.
I'll put you up with a haircut, man. Just come on down to the office. I'll set you up in my office.
You're gonna fade me up real quick?
You can look sharp like the young kids, man.
I love it, dude. Well, hey, what's the average age of your appraisers, you think? I know you got a younger crew more than most, right?
We do. If you take Jim Fugate out of it, we're all under 40.
Resident old guy, right?
Actually, no, I'm 39, Jim's 66 or 67. Then we've got Susan, Tim's sister-in-law. She is in her later 40s. But the appraising population as a whole, I would think the median age is well over 55.
It has to be.
Yeah, oh yeah.
It has to
be. When I was 25, I was at a appraiser association meeting, and the director for the appraisers for the state showed up, and he had a pie graph. And 3/4 of it were people over 60. The next biggest chunk was over 50. And then the smallest sliver you could see was under 30. And that was 14 years ago. And so it's gotten low. And right now, actually, California has the lowest level of appraisers since they started licensing.
Lowest number of appraisers.
Yeah.
Why?
One of the things after the market crash and the first iteration of the home valuation code of conduct, you made all the barriers to entry much harder. So they made you have a bachelor's to get to the certified level. They increased the time it took. They increased the educational hours, the work log hours, and it just wasn't worth it. You're talking 3 years of maybe making 10 to 30 grand at most before you can even have a shot to make 50 or 60. And then it's another couple of years before you get certified. So at that point, you'd be better off just to stay in school and get a better degree, go into something else. And so the federal oversight committee for us actually lowered the standards a couple of years ago, but California didn't adopt them. They don't have to, right? It's up to them to uphold the minimum, but they can impose a maximum standard. But a week or 2 weeks ago, they actually just adopted the national standard.
Really?
So So two of our guys who are licensed, who are about 8 to 10 months away from being able to get certified, can now submit their logs and go through the classes to go test for their certification.
And so the certification is important because a lot of lenders require a certified appraiser.
Correct. To be FHA certified, you've got to be certified. A lot of, like, you guys, Guild Mortgage, some other folks will take licensees, which is great because we've got 3 guys that are licensed that have been appraising for 3 years, and they do a great job. So those guys now, since California's adopted the new standard, maybe the next 3, 6, 9 months, they'll all be certified.
Question. What are the guys at the top of the appraisal game? How much do they make?
If you're talking
you sharing W-2s now?
No, yeah.
No, I'm curious. I never know.
I'm just kidding.
On the residential side, I would say the average would be 60 to 90. However, we've got guys in our office that are averaging 4 to 6 per year, 400,000 to 600,000. They work. We're a little bit different in that we've got a full office set up. So we've got secretary support, we've got report writers, we handle all the billing for everybody. So they get to just show up and work, right? If you're doing all of that and you're working from home by yourself, it makes it really difficult.
So the guys that are making like 400 to 600 a year, how many appraisals are they doing a month? What is that?
Anywhere from 80 to 120. Like, we've got some guys right now that have already got, one guy right now I'm looking has got 54 for the month already.
Wow.
So just develop good systems. You have good support.
How many appraisals can you do in a day? Like, what does that mean? Like, is he working really? Because I mean, you look at like some real estate agents are more efficient than others. Some mortgage guys are more efficient than others, but there is kind of like, because there's got to be a little bit of a capacity to what you do, because you're the one that has to do the physical inspection, right? Like you can't farm that out.
We do. Right. And so what a lot of us
where does that kind of like, how many can you do a day? What a lot of us
do, and we found, well, right now is a little bit of a different time because everybody's home, so it's easy to schedule the refinances.
True.
It's really easy. What tends to work the best is when you can just group a ton of inspections on one day and then have a day and a half, 2 days to write them up. So usually on Fridays, I try to see anywhere from 8 to 12 properties. And then I take Monday and half the day Tuesday to write them up. If I'm up early on the weekends, I'll type a report or two. But that way you're not back and forth. You're not in the office trying to rush through a report and then going, oh shit, I got to get to Elk Grove in half an hour and trying to jam out of the office. So if you can do all your inspections on one day, then all your write-ups on another day, it makes things a whole lot more efficient. But if you're splitting it up, the most manageable is to see 4 and write 4 in a day. But that's really grinding it out, because if you think you're driving to 4 different properties and trying to type 4 different reports, that gets to be a pretty tall order.
You're not just driving to 4 different properties. I mean, you're also driving the comps too, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Cool. Hey, so it's 102. I sent out the text earlier just to get the link out, because last week I had like 22 people RSVP'd, but we only had like 5 people show up, and I had a bunch of people say that they couldn't get in. So we'll start running this. I am recording it, so I will send this out, get it just cut off that beginning and the end, and I'll send it out to everybody that did RSVP. And then I'll probably get this to you, buddy, and post it up on YouTube or something if you ever want it. But I just want to do a quick introduction here real quick, and then just lay it out. So this is what we put together. This Levi Thomas with Apex Property Advisors, kind of my go-to guy for appraisals. Yep, there he is. Appraisal questions. Super helpful for me. He's kind of my arrow in the quiver. Him and his team, dude, they're just fantastic. They knock them out for us. They do a really good job. They get value when you can get value, and when you can't get value, we understand why. And they do a really good job of explaining it. They're open to conversations about valuation and walking. A lot of times you talk with an appraiser, and sometimes it becomes challenging for them to kind of work through the value. Like, they really work with us, which is super cool. And he comes on and does stuff like this. I don't know if this is probably the 5th or 6th time that we've done this appraisal class in a similar format. And so I just wanted to put this together because we're in a different time, right? Where we've got people staying at home. We've got job losses. We've got properties coming off the market. We have different inventory levels. And this guy's out here doing appraisals every day. So I thought it'd be really cool to bring him on. I've got a couple of questions that I'm just going to fire off at him. But what I'd love for this to be is more of a conversation, right? So he's a super good guy. He's open to all kinds of questions. Ask him softballs, ask him tough ones. And really this is for you to kind of figure out and identify, how do you value property today? Like, what are the changes that we're seeing? So I want to maybe open it up for a second to you, Levi, and just kind of throw this out there and just say, like, okay, we're 5 weeks into this thing, and we're really, 2 to 3 weeks into some of the, where it became really difficult for agents to sell. And then it came, and then we've had a lot of changes, and I know as of today, now all of a sudden, I don't know if you guys saw that, right? That I think Placer County came out and said you can show property. So I guess I'll just throw this to you, Levi. Like, if you can give me just a brief overview of just kind of what are you seeing out there right now? Like, what is different today than it was 30, 45 days ago when you're approaching a purchase transaction?
As of right now, I am not seeing a significant change. Keep in mind that appraisers work off historical data. So any impact that's happened in this week and the last several weeks, we're not going to really be able to see or measure until 1, 2, 3 months into the future. As of right now, I'd say purchases are only about 10, 15% of our overall volume. Refinances are so high. I am not seeing a significant difference. I'm still appraising properties for purchases that still have really low days on the market. They're still priced in line with the recently closed sales. We had a little bit of a flattening prior to this. Things were just stagnant. There's a certain point where values hit a ceiling in any given area, and we'd been at that point for a little bit. You have some fluctuations where property values were going a little bit higher, a little bit lower, and that was typical with the market that we've been in. if COVID didn't come around when the rates dropped, I think we would be in an accelerated increasing trend. But right now, it appears to be a basic holding pattern. And a lot of that's probably due to not a lot of transactions going on, which may be the saving grace. You're not going to have these outlier sales where folks were, either fearful and sold, they wanted to cut their price and cut bait and get out. But right now, I have not seen a noticeable or significant difference in the values, but it's going to take a month or two for us to be able to accurately gauge that.
Okay. Hey man, talk to me about that. You said ceiling, you said you were approaching ceiling for area. What do you mean by that when you say that?
But I think that any given geographic area has only a certain capacity for price growth, right? As we all know, Sacramento's grown by leaps and bounds in terms of desirability, community services, restaurants, just the overall appeal. But what's hampered us in terms of getting higher values, low inventory. It slows down that rate of appreciation, right? Then you factor in the end of 2018 when the stock market was going down, rates were going up. If you're looking at a rate of appreciation, which we'd seen from 2012 to 13, it was pretty steady. It was constantly going up at a near 45-degree angle. You hit the end of 2018, it really started to flatten out. And since 2018, we've not really seen many significant increases in value as a whole. Obviously, there's differences in little niche neighborhoods. Certain desirable areas, the lower priced homes tend to still go up a whole lot faster because those are the entry-level homes. But as of right now, I just did an appraisal in Serrano. People bought it 3.5 years ago for 1.6. I'm struggling to get to 1.6 right now. So you get to these certain areas where it's just not going to go up. You need a fundamental change in the market. You either need more inventory, which is also going to slow the rate of appreciation, but you need more people buying and you need more people willing to come in and go higher and higher and higher. When we've got limited inventory and then you factor that into what we're seeing now with just a complete slowdown economically, I don't know that it's going to shoot up and make a new level every year. I hope that makes sense.
Totally does, man. So what do you think that there's a certain price ranges that are more at risk than others?
I think the upper end are always more susceptible when things change economically, right? And then you factor in now the limited availability of jumbo loans. That's going to really be interesting to see how that plays out. I think it's going to always be the extremes. I think it's going to be the real low end, and I think it's going to be the real high end. And I say the real low end because a lot of the folks are service industry or labor that may have been laid off or lost their jobs. So that might suffer a little bit. The upper end, when people have a little bit more disposable income, they tend to be much more conservative in times like these and not make movements that are risky. So they're going to probably sit on the sidelines if they've got disposable cash, and they're going to wait to see how this plays out. And if it dips, they're going to buy on the dips. They're not going to buy right now where we don't know if it's going to just stay flat for a little bit, or they don't know if it's going to just start going down again like it did in 2008. And then you factor that in with the limited availability for jumbo loans. It's going to be interesting to see how that works.
When you say upper end and lower end, will you define those? What you think when you're saying upper end, lower end, like from a price point standpoint? Let's say Placer County.
Take Placer County. Let's just take Roseville for example. You've got $1 million homes in Roseville. You've also got $200,000-$300,000 homes in Roseville. So if you were to just search the 95661 zip code as a whole, or the 95747, and you've got your highest sale and your lowest sale, that's what I mean. I just mean whatever your lowest sale is and whatever your highest sale is. So the upper end and the lower end
are the ones that are at risk.
Yep.
So I was under
the
impression that prices were going up as of through March, but you're saying they're kind of flat, or?
Yeah, you see little bounces, right? So if you were to develop a trend line, if you're going to go all the way back to 2012 or 13, like I said, it was consistently going up. But when we got to 2018, it started to flatten. And when you're in a market where there's not a lot of significant activity, we don't have a lot of sales because there's not a lot of inventory. People are in low interest rate loans already, prior to now. They weren't moving. People were staying in place. And I'm sure Keith can attest to this a little bit, where people are staying in place. And if they have equity, they're consolidating debt or they're doing home improvements, they weren't necessarily interested in moving. Without that activity, you need volume. You need a data set, a significant data set to push that data forward. So if you look at a lot of the graphs that we'll do or the trending that we'll do, it's bouncing. It may still be generally going up, but if you look at that trend line, you'll see plots way down in the low, way up in the high. and it's just barely creeping along in an upward fashion. And that's simply because of the low inventory. It's a basic supply and demand issue.
You make a good point on that, man. Like so I was reading an article with Redfin that they said, gosh, and I might be off on it a little bit, but like in 2010, the average person stayed in their home like 7 years. And then 2020, it was like 12 years. And now all of a sudden we've got a huge number, record number of people refinancing to lower record interest rates, which is going to further impact people staying in their home longer. Right. So
right,
like that's going to impact inventory. And I look at that as, a lot of people are worried about, I guess this is the big question, right? Like a lot of people are worried about home prices dropping. And I think, fundamentally, and I'm curious to your input on this, but like I think fundamentally, before all this, like housing was doing well. Like it was healthy, right? It was high, but it was healthy. There was a lot of fundamentals. We still had inventory. We had a lot of housing starts, but we still weren't building with demand. You got millennial home buyers coming in, you got the Bay Area people coming in, and then you got people refinancing and staying. So I think we had a lot there, and we're relative to the median home price, we got fairly good income to the median income. So it's a more affordable area for the most part, right? But like, so you have all those, and then you throw in 15-20% unemployment rate. Like how stable was the market before, and how much disruption do you think it can withstand, if you will? Is that a fair question? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but like, what are you thinking about that?
Yeah, not a crystal ball and not an economist, but when these times hit, I reach out to the guy that trained me, John McIntosh, brilliant man, been in real estate for a long, long time in all aspects, broker, guy owns probably 300 plus properties. It's kind of been there and seen it all. His guess was that where we are, exclude the high and the low that I was previously talking about, he thinks that a lot of those people are going to be just fine in the long run, with the caveat that folks get back to work within a reasonable amount of time. Right. We can shelter a storm for probably the end of this month, maybe possibly, next month. The further we go, the harsher it's going to get. And I think it's just going to be because people just don't have the money to buy homes, right? If you take people who are already barely qualifying for loans, take that into consideration with the job layoff and trying to find a new job. That's going to take a lot of people off the bench that have been waiting to buy a house. So, but then I think there's a lot of folks who, take yourself, maybe myself, for example, that we've been in our houses for a long time. We've got good equity. We're in good positions. If it dips, we'll start buying maybe something else. So I think a lot of people are right now, it's just a holding pattern. But if we don't get back to work soon, there's inevitably going to be some sort of drop. To what end, I really don't know. Couldn't forecast that. But I think the desirability of the greater Sacramento marketplace can withstand a little bit longer of this. And then people get back to work. I think we'll get pretty quickly back into the games where we were before.
Is there ever a place that you get into where like that kind of thing starts impacting values outside of just looking at comparable sales? Because again, you have to look back. So in a decreasing market, it's easier for you to hold value. In an increasing market, it's harder for you to get value because you guys have to do a backwards look. So at what point does, because you have, and actually there's where I'm going with this. So all the weight is given to the closed sales, right? It's like taking my, 150,000 mile F-150 and putting it on Craigslist for $40,000. Like, that doesn't mean it's worth $40,000. So
right.
A lot of times agents will say, well, these, that we've got pendings, or we've got these properties listed. Well, those don't really impact value. We have to go backwards to look at those solds. But at what point or is there a point where you start taking that into account?
We're going to need at least a quarter of that. So it depends on the appraiser. It depends on the lending standard. If I go back to 2008 to 2011, if we used a sale that was over 90 days and we did not make a declining market adjustment, we'd get hammered by underwriting. But that's a two-way street. If we did that same thing in an increasing market, they were always reluctant when we made the positive adjustments. But if you think about lending, wanting to protect your investment, they're going to be more conservative with that. So we'll need to see at least a quarter or two of consistent declining trends before we're going to start deeming it a declining market where we check that box on the appraisal. And at that point, if you're using comps over 90 days, they're going to want some sort of declining market adjustment. And the support for that will come with the pendings and actives being lower than the properties that are over 90 days. You'll start to see it. It becomes fairly obvious at that point. If you take a property that's 6 months old, let's just say that sold for 500, but a model match is now selling for 400 and you're consistently seeing that across all the comparable listings, it's a pretty clear indication that things have dropped. But I think the way that real estate moves so slowly, and more specifically on the appraisal side, we've got a little bit of time left here to insulate us. I think if it goes too long, it's going to have to drop. It just seems to me inevitable at that point. But when we get to that point where maybe, let's just say hypothetically, things are declining, lenders are going to want us to really try to use as many sales as we can within 90 days. They're going to really want us to look at what the pending sales are doing, because those are the clear indication of what the market is doing at that given moment. But right now, or prior to COVID, I'd use a sale that's 9-10 months old, because we've been either increasing or relatively stable. So using an older sale is really no problem. But if you're in a declining market and you're using older sales, you're in effect trying to say that the market is still where it was 6, 8, 10, 12 months ago, wherever it was, when it clearly, hypothetically, would not be if we keep at this pace.
Is it a silly idea to think that, like, okay, so we have less buyers maybe, right? And then, but then you have less sellers. So that really the only thing that should significantly impact values if we have an oversupply of it, right? We have too many homes, not enough buyers, prices have to drop.
Justin,
you're laughing.
Flashing McCooney.
What's Justin? Is Justin flashing McCooney?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Sorry about that. I'm supporting local businesses one meal at a time.
I appreciate that. We're talking about getting McCooney tonight, man. I haven't had that in a while. I need to. I miss it so much. But it's probably a big reason why I've lost like 12 pounds since I've been on this thing. We're not eating all the crap from dining out.
Keith, I was going to say, you've been looking amazing lately. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it.
I think you're bucking the trend. Most people put on weight
eating
when
at
they
home.
Opposite.
What?
I think it's the opposite for most. They're all
Yeah, right? Yeah,
It's
most people pig out and they're stuck at home.
So that's just the thing, is I eat most healthy at home. So we're like whole foods, plant-based at home. So I eat when I eat bad, it's when I'm at the office. Anyways, so going back to that, man, is that a silly idea, or is there, because I mean, you've got equal amount of sellers, like, okay, maybe that's a two-part question, right? And I would love to open this up to anybody else that has questions too. Like, please just jump on and ask. I've muted everybody on here, so it just wasn't in there. Okay, a couple of things. Just a Zoom tip. If you're on this call and you're on a computer and you're muted, you can just hit your space bar, hold it down, and it'll unmute you, talk, and then release the space bar and it'll mute you again. But at any point in time, just, raise your hand and ask a question. But so stability in the marketplace, right? The more listings that we have, the more price instability we're going to have because of inventory, right? So, but if less people are listing and less people are buying, and that stays in balance.
You're right. Supply and demand. Imagine the supply and demand teeter-totter. If there's not a lot of people selling, not a lot of people buying, that in effect slows things down and actually buys us time for the economy to get back on track. However, if you have a lot of people hit the panic button and or they're forced to sell because they can't afford their home, then all of a sudden the market starts becoming flooded with inventory. You're going to see exactly what we saw through 2008 to 2011. It's going to be a complete buyer's market at that point.
Got it. So we're seeing a lot of people put their properties on hold, right? Like a lot. And I'm thinking they're all probably, it's herd mentality, right? They're all probably going to put them back on the market at the same period in time, right? Do you have any thoughts on that and like what that's going to do?
I haven't seen that yet, but it's definitely an interesting scenario. I think that if they're priced accordingly, they should sell relatively quickly. But again, it just depends if people are back working and they're not fearful of what's going to happen. I think as a culture or as a community, overcoming the fear is going to be the biggest hurdle. There's a lot of people who are completely unafraid even at the current moment. And the minute that they can get out and freely move around, they're probably going to take advantage of everything that they can, whether it's, cheaper services, you want to get your deck built for a cheaper price, or you want to buy a house for a cheaper price. I think a lot of those people are going to jump back in. But if they were to all hit the market at one point, I think the realtors would be the key to knowing what the buyer demand is at that point. That's not really my area. So I think if you're staying in touch with your realtors, and we can ask the realtors that are on this, they might have a much better idea than I would.
Is there an argument to say that when we get on the other side of this, if this is like a blip, that you can pretty much exclude the data during the closure?
That's interesting. I think depends on how far out you're doing it. I think in recent, let's just say June, as long as it's not significant, you'd probably want to use them. You're going to have more commentary, more support. And every appraisal is different. I mean, if they were all cookie cutter, it'd be a whole lot easier. But it could be different from every area within this greater area. It could be way different in West Roseville than it could be in Fab 40s and downtown Sac. It could be vastly different in all those areas. So I'd have to look at it on an individual case-by-case basis.
Okay. The other one that I had is, what about community? Like, okay, so it's Sun City, right? So I was talking to, I think he's on this call. I was talking to Brandon Leon. So Brandon Leon takes a listing up in Meta Vista. What's the community? Lake of the Pines, right?
Winchester or Lake of the Pines?
Lake of the Pines. That's not Meta Vista.
Auburn.
Sorry.
Auburn.
So Auburn. Lake of the Pines, Auburn. That is not an age-based community, but it is a community where older people typically live up there, right? And so his kind of thought process, and it sat for a while, was that maybe this isn't a good time to list it because the actual buyer is probably an older buyer. And that's kind of the demographic that's most at risk right now. And they're not really out and active. So if you take that even more hyperlocal to like an actual community like Sun City, like, so if I'm taking a listing in Sun City, should I be considering anything different right now as an agent in a community like that? Like,
I don't know. I think
are you approaching that any different than you would have 60 days ago?
No, I would think that's a good question for a realtor as well. And I think that, take somebody from the Bay Area. We have no shortage of people coming from the Bay Area to buy here. You could be an older person living in one of the densely populated cities in the Bay Area and go, you know what? It's too dense for me. If something like this comes back again, I want to get where it's a little bit more spread out and private. Sun City, Lincoln, or Roseville may be way more appealing than living in a densely populated area in the Bay Area. So it might actually make our retirement communities up here more marketable. I've been on Zillow looking for homes in Montana and Idaho left and right that I can buy for cheap. The next time something happens to get out of Dodge.
Are you finding anything?
Nothing that I can afford without having to drive 10 miles down a gravel driveway.
I know.
Right? Levi, let me know. Let's go in halves on a mountain. You can have one half, I'll have the other.
Oh, let's do thirds. Let's do thirds.
We can start a real estate compound out there.
I'm telling you, man. Or either at a hunting complex, and then it's dumb money. You charge people dumb money to come out.
I got
business investment.
One of the guys that used to work for me retired up in Idaho, and he finds it amusing to send me pictures on a daily basis of how many fish he catches or the elk in his backyard. He's like, how's all the craziness in California? Like, he'll just send a picture of him sitting at a restaurant eating.
I'll just send him a picture of the ocean.
Right. Yeah, but he's not really on lockdown in the town that he's in. They've limited some stuff, but he's freely moving around town. No problems.
It's awesome. So what I'm hearing from you right now, man, is like not enough data, not a lot that's really changed for you in terms of how you're approaching properties. It really just depends on how long this thing goes. That, you know, when we're gonna start seeing that, right?
Exactly.
So I guess with that, like, so if you're, okay. So what are you seeing right now that agents, and guys, jump in if you have any questions. Like, are you seeing anything that agents are doing right now a little bit more than before that, like, I don't understand why they're pricing the property this way, or they're maybe pricing it too low, or are you seeing any strategies that may be working where they're pricing it too low and then it's getting bid up? Like, are you seeing anything unique right now that's happening that either agents are like, wow, that was really cool that an agent did that and the thing got bid up, or these people are completely approaching the property wrong because of this?
I've yet to see any of that to date. I've got friends in the commercial space that a lot of their listings that they had for sales, not for lease, but for sale, people are wanting to just cut bait and move. Their thought is, I've seen this before. I'd rather dump it right now if I can. But on the residential side, I haven't seen anything that has stuck out that would make me question an agent's motives.
I do have something, sorry, I mean to like interrupt, but I talked to an agent last week and they said that they had an appraiser come out and they devalued the property by $20,000 because of the coronavirus. So
that's ridiculous.
Okay, good. We're all on the same page, just checking. But it was it just seems so crazy because she based it on like, oh, well, this is what happened before in like somewhere in history that, you know, it happened. And so she devalued it, made the agent save the sale, but I thought that was nuts. So I was just wondering if that was ever a factor.
That's nuts. If I were that agent, I would try to get a copy of that appraisal and send it to appraiser to perform an official review. And if there's deficiencies because of that, turn it into the state. We report historical data while also reporting what we are seeing the current market trends doing. And as of yet, there's been no significant change, no statistically measurable change as of yet. That could obviously change in the near future, but for somebody to erroneously make some sort of adjustment or devaluation because of that, not supportable. For us, we've got to be able to support every single thing we do or do not do in the appraisal. You can still err on the cautious side, that's fine, but you've got to have supportable rationale for it. What we're doing in our office is we've got a couple different paragraphs talking about the current economic situation, the COVID virus, explaining things that how future market conditions could change. We are really relying heavily on being able to call the agents for the actives and pendings to get their takes on it. And if there's been no significant change, there's no significant change in the value. And if agents are reporting, nope, we still had good demand, offers were still good, then that's no change. So you're relying on the historical data, the closed sales, and then you're talking to the agents, which are on the front line. And if they're not seeing a significant change, there's nothing to devalue. There's no rationale to devalue the appraisal. So yeah.
Go for it, Drew.
Go ahead.
That seems crazy to me. I have a lot of questions. I would love to get my hands on an appraisal.
Oh, I have a lot of questions too. Believe me, I would be very curious.
Yeah.
So, and she did too. I mean, like, she was able to save the sale and like the seller, and she represented the buyer, but she, the seller and the buyer kind of came to agreement, like, fine. They met in the middle. They came down 10,000. They came up 10,000. That was that. But I find that to be really ridiculous. So since she represented the buyer, so she could get a copy of it, or at least she should have a copy of it. And then you said to turn it in, and if there's any, what was the word you used? Sorry.
Any deficiencies in the appraisal.
Deficiencies.
You can't just erroneously state because the coronavirus, I'm going to drop it by this much. You can state because of current market conditions, I am erring on the conservative. I wouldn't even say conservative. I would say the lower range of value. But to support that, you would have to show that days on market's increased. You'd have to show that homes are selling at a less % of their original list price. You would have to show that values are starting to decline, average days on market, inventory is going up. You would have to be able to point to numerous factors to be able to support that.
Okay.
And right now, from what I've seen, I don't see that yet. But like I said, it could change tomorrow.
How many reports do you think that you're because you appraise, but you also run your division there. How many reports do you guys do a month?
Prior to March, we'd average anywhere between 400 and 500. We had March as our best month. We hit 600. And right now we're on track to maybe do about 450, 475 for this month.
Cool. You're seeing it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're all in this office, not all at the same time, but for the most part, there's at least 6 or 7 of us in here at a time. And we're all in constant contact. And that's the beauty of actually having an office with other appraisers, is that we've got other people to bounce problems off of. And our discussions have not had anything to do with declining values yet.
So if you had a family member getting ready to buy right now, what would you tell them?
Same thing I'd tell them if this thing wasn't going on. I would make sure that it was the right time and choice for them, that financially it was a good move. My folks are in Calistoga, and they've been trying to sell their house since the Santa Rosa fire, which actually ended up hurting them in the long run, but they're now in contract. The people buying their house are off work, but they've got enough money. It's their dream house. They were born and raised in Calistoga. They want to stay there. So it's going through. The only thing that's been held up were inspections. Those were supposed to resume this week. I need to catch up with my folks, actually. And then they're thinking of just living in their trailer and their RV, and they're looking anywhere from Shingle Springs to Nevada City. And they're okay to just bum around for a while, but they're in a position that they can do that, right? The people that I would be a little bit more fearful of is maybe first-time home buyers or people without as much income that are really going to go out on a limb to try to buy a house, but they don't necessarily have their career set in stone, or they don't have as much money in savings at the bank as they should to make that jump, because we don't know what's going to happen. But I would tell any of my friends or family members that no matter what kind of economic conditions we're in, I don't think that discussion would change regardless.
I'm in the same boat there, man. I mean, it's like, You know, and I've had that. I have a clients asking me all the time, and my question I'm asking for them is what, like, I think the better question is it the right time for you, not necessarily a right time to buy. And if you've got margin in your life, I think a lot of times, you know, we see these first time home buyers, and especially with the down payment assistance stuff, and that's really not an issue anymore because there's not really doing down payment assistance, but you see these down payment assistance borrowers basically using every last penny that they have, which is not a lot. So they don't have a historical ability to save money. They're usually high debt to income ratio, and they don't have a lot really invested in that transaction. And then they're in service-based industry jobs, right? They're not in, you know, typically not in extremely secure employment. Those are the people that I think are at risk right now. And so when they ask me that question, I'm saying, well, you know, do you guys have margin in this decision? How secure are your jobs? If one of you lost your job or your income was cut in half for a short period of time, what would that look like? I mean, those are all very fair questions to ask. And if they have margin in their lives, I don't necessarily think that it's going to be necessarily a bad thing. You know, 50% of every decision is the numbers, and 50% of every decision, I believe, is how do you sleep at night with that decision. Both are equally important. I like good sleep, and I like to make sure that I'm making good financial decisions. I think on a personal residence, you know, for me, like, I don't know if I would buy an investment property right now just because I'm like, you know, I'll see what happens here. But I don't, if my dream home came on the market, I wouldn't hesitate buying it right now. For me, that's a long-term thing. If I lose a little bit of money and, you know, in a short period of time, I'm going to be in that thing for 10, 15 years. We're going to do fine. People that bought in 2008, you know, and then 2009 hits, are like, man, we're idiots. What happened? But they're fine after a period of time. So, and I'm not saying that I think right now is 2008, 2009, but yeah, that would be my answer.
Well, I think that's a good point though, because a lot of people, I remember when the market was down, reading an article from a former hedge fund investor that turned yogi, and his thought was, when the market or things are down, you've got to remember that it's a cycle. The down times never last as long as the good, but the problem is you freak out in the bad, and then when things are good, you either get complacent or you're worried that the next downturn is right around the corner. So you've just got to remember that no matter what point in the cycle you're in, it's a cycle. It's going to keep going.
I love it. Anybody have any questions? I got a couple others I was going to fire at you, but anybody else have anything?
I do. I've got a quick question. This is Mark Fuller with Remax out in Folsom, El Dorado Hills area. Levi, curious what your thoughts are as it relates to new homes, the next gen homes, the added value of the next gen homes versus a resale. I've got a couple clients pretty interested in the shiny objects of the new home, and yet the prices they're charging, you look at the comparables on a resale perspective when you're still having to jump some dollars into window treatments and backyard, et cetera, it doesn't make sense. How do the valuations come out? How do they get the appraisals done on those new homes?
So for new construction, we've got Fannie Mae imposed guidelines, lender imposed guidelines. So one of those is they want a minimum of one comp from a competing builder. And that's simply to ensure that one builder isn't price controlling the prices for that area, which, you know, out in West Roseville, James, anyway, because they've got a million communities out there. But you want to be able to draw from multiple different communities to ensure that one isn't just controlling the prices. But in terms of new home versus a slightly older resale, it's a tough call because a lot of people really like a new home. A lot of people like to be able to go in, pick out their upgrades, have it done what they want, and move in. But to take it to the next step, I agree with you that the things that you pay for in terms of lot premium and upgrades, those aren't market based. You know, a lot of times lot premiums are an arbitrary number that the builder just imposes to sell one lot for more. You know, I used to see it all the time where they would say, you know, this open space bigger lot, then 10 years later there's an arterial street that goes through the back of it. So it's not only is it worth less, you've dropped even further, right? So keep those things in mind, and especially with upgrades, regardless of a resale, regardless of a new home, you're not going to get dollar for dollar on anything. And when you pay for upgrades from the builder, you could get those same upgrades for significantly cheaper on the open market, right? But it's too bad you can't just buy the house with the sheetrock done and then pick out your own cabinets and flooring at a later time, because you could get them for a whole lot cheaper. So I think it's an emotional decision that a lot of people make sometimes. They simply want the new home and they want to pick out the cabinets and the shower stalls and the granite and the backsplash, and move in and have a nice new smell to it. But putting in a backyard's not cheap. Putting in shutters or window coverings aren't cheap. So for me personally, I rarely ever bought a new car in my life. I like to buy one that's a year or two old, you know, and if you're in a new neighborhood, you want to be in a new neighborhood, find one that's a year or two old. It may be almost the same price as the new home, but it might be a little bit less. But more often than not, it's already going to have the backyard done in it. It's already going to have the window coverings. It's already going to have everything ready to go. And in terms of an economic life of that property or wear and tear or depreciation, it's not a significant difference, but you're going to be a whole lot better off not having to pay for a backyard or some of those other things. That being said, I do a whole lot of new construction, so I don't want you to turn your buyers away from new construction.
Anybody else?
Awesome. I appreciate it very much. Yeah, it's a good perspective, and it's pretty much going back to what you guys were talking about a moment ago in terms of whether it's a good time to buy. It's really, if it's a good time to buy for you. They were looking at a house at $765,000 brand new, but no backyard and no window treatments. So another $100,000. There's just no way if you got to sell in a year or 2 years, you're going to have a hard time selling.
Right. It's the same thing with a pool. You know, you want a house with a pool, but you're going to spend what's the bare minimum you could probably do a pool for right now? 50, 60 grand for a small cookie cutter pool. Ideally, or most likely, it's going to be 80 to 100, 120. Or you could buy a house, you know, if you're patient, buy a house that already got the pool in it. Let somebody else take that hit for you, you know?
Because you're doing what, a $20,000 adjustment on the pool at max, unless it's just a ridiculous over the top pool?
It depends on the price point, right? So like if you're going to take the 500 to 700 or 800,000 price point, depending on the age of that pool, the size, the quality, it could be anywhere from 15 to 30. But pool is the worst investment. And I'm struggling with this because my wife wants a pool and I just know that it's not worth it. So I'm having this battle right now.
I think we have a pool. We put in a pool at the house that we're in right now. And so I agree with you that the pool is the worst financial decision you'll ever make. But I will tell you, it's the best family decision I've ever made.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well said.
I'll come home from work and the girls are holding my board short saying, Daddy, you want to go in the pool? And we're in the pool in the summertime here. We're in the pool 6 days a week.
Yeah.
It's awesome. So I'll give you that little nugget, man. Sorry.
Yeah,
Do the pool. Do the pool.
You told me that before, and I conveniently didn't tell my wife that.
I'll send a video to her of this.
I have a question. I have a question, Levi. When you're appraising non-permitted space, how do you approach that? I've got, like if somebody's converted a garage, it's really nice. It's awesome square footage. How do you look at that, but it doesn't show up as square footage on tax record?
That's a great question. We come across that a lot. So it's going to really depend on the appraiser. But in my perspective, the fundamental best way to do it is you've got to look at the quality in which it's done, right? So if you've got a garage conversion, they've taken the door out, it's heated and cooled, there's no funky step downs, it's finished in the same manner as the rest of the house, you're then going to want to go and find other homes with non-permitted garage conversions, right? Or if it's, they kind of maybe built a room in there, but it could still function as a garage, you've got to look at it and go, okay, what holds more value here? What does the market say? And so you've got to do a bigger, broader range search, and you go, okay, is a 2-car garage more important than a couple hundred extra square feet? If so, how much is it going to cost to remove that little room that they constructed in the garage? And if it's a couple grand less, if we call it economically curable, meaning that the market value isn't going to be impacted by the cost to remove it, then you just describe it, you move on, you count it as a 2-car garage, no big deal. The way to look at it, let's just say somebody put an addition on the back of their house long ago, didn't permit it. You can't exactly break that space out and not count it. So you've got to look at it and go, okay, completed in a workmanlike manner, yes. Does it increase the functional utility of the home? Yes. Are there any obvious building code violations? No, I'm not a building inspector, but nothing looks out of place. What you then have to do is find a minimum of 2 comps, closed comps, that have similar non-permitted discrepancies. And the thought being and this is a Fannie Mae requirement, it's not required from an appraisal standard. If I were to go do a private appraisal for you, it's not required, but it is best practice to provide those comps because you're demonstrating that the market does not react adversely to something that's not permitted. And chances are you can do that, but if you go into an area like East Sac, not the Fab 40s, but all the surrounding areas in East Sac, dang near every house has either got a bedroom, extra bedroom or bath that's not shown in county records, a couple hundred extra square feet. And a lot of that simply because the records were wrong. They lost a lot of the records in the flood in the early 1900s. They've lost records when they updated from microfiche to digital. So it's easy in neighborhoods like that. But if you were to just go into an 1980s area of Roseville or Rockland, you've got to maybe use a comp that's not necessarily what you'd consider one of your best comps or an ideal comp, but you're going to find a couple of them and just demonstrate that that's not an issue. You're also going to talk to some realtors in the area that you think that are really well versed in that neighborhood and go, hey, I've got this house. They built on a 300 square foot addition to the back, not permitted. You explain to them the situation and you just simply ask them, would your buyers not buy that house because of that? And the fact of the matter is, if it increases the marketability and functional utility and there's no health or safety issues, people are going to buy it because they know that it's cheaper, a little bit cheaper usually because it's not permitted, than if it were permitted and it were that permitted larger size. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so there's always going to be a hit on it one way or the other, whether if it's not permitted, even if it's great and done like high quality workmanship, there's always a hit on it one way or the other.
Theoretically, there's going to be just a little bit, but as long as it's not something that you would say is statistically significant, it really isn't going to matter, right? It just depends on how you value it. I know some appraisers who will isolate that space and say, I'm giving $150 a square foot to the main house and $100 to that. So you've got to kind of look, sometimes you've seen enclosed patios, they're heated or cooled, they're finished nice, but it's got a different roof line. It's a lower ceiling height. It's not quite the same, but it definitely functions as living space. You're going to try to compensate for that difference in quality just a little bit. But, if it's one of those things where it is, they extended the roof line out over it, it's the same, then it might not take a hit at all. But a lot of times those non-permitted additions aren't completed in the exact same way.
And from a lending standpoint, if you have those two comps, we're using in value for Fannie, Freddie, FHA, VA, USDA. So as long as that kind of two comp thing that he talked about is more so a Fannie standard, and as long as we have those two comps of similar construction, you're good. And also similar construction doesn't mean an added bedroom, right? Like it doesn't have to be an added bedroom. It just needs to be similar added space. So if they added a bedroom, one's an added bedroom and one's added bathrooms, often those different spaces can be used. It doesn't have to be like kind, if you will. But from a lending standpoint, that square footage should be used if the appraiser does their job in justifying the use of it through comparable sales.
And
I do have a question to add on to that, because I have a friend of mine who they were thinking about selling. They live up in Auburn and they have a garage that they converted into a full-on apartment with a kitchenette and everything else. So it's not permitted. And they had an appraiser come out and they said that the property was now worth like $600,000. That was 3 years ago. And so, I think for me, it's like when it's like a full apartment, it's not just a room, but it's like full apartment. Like, now, is that something?
That's a much different scenario because you've got to determine if the zoning even allows for it.
Oh.
If the zoning doesn't allow for it, you can't do it. So Keith knows all about burn down letters. And it's, so if
he laughs.
Because man, they can turn a deal sideways quickly. If you've got, say in Auburn, say maybe it's even a walkout basement apartment, right? Where they've got a kitchen down there. If the zoning doesn't allow for any cooking spaces down there, then the appraiser has to point it out. It's not the appraiser's job to say it has to be removed. That's the underwriter's job. It's our job to point out what's legally allowed and what's not. And let's just say, even in your example, they've got a kitchen in there, a bathroom. Say the zoning doesn't allow for a bathroom in that space. Say the zoning doesn't allow for a kitchen or a cooking facility of any type. You can't give it value. If you give it value and the house is destroyed and Keith's company is holding the note on that, then I'm going to get sued because I gave value to something that was illegally existed. And then, so what the appraiser should do in that situation is say, hey, it's got an illegal kitchen, it's got an illegal bathroom, but the space is finished. The building code allows for there to be finished non-living area. So I am giving it value specifically as finished bonus space. I'm not giving value to the kitchen. I'm not giving value to the bathroom.
Hey guys, I'm in a meeting. Cameron can't come out right now.
Oh man, I love it. I love it. Zoom meetings at home.
I know. I'm sorry.
No, you need to put Cameron on the video.
No. No, my son's in trouble. So, I know. So he came home an hour later than he was supposed to. So he's in trouble. Anyway, I am listening. I promise.
Awesome.
So yeah, you got to determine what's legally allowed. And that's
Okay.
part of, in any appraisal, whether it's private, residential, commercial, one of the biggest things is called the highest and best use test. And that's to determine what's physically, legally, and financially allowed. So think of, go down J Street in Sacramento, you see stuff that was a house, and then, they converted to commercial space with an apartment up above. You've got to look at that and go, well, it's allowed to have a house there. It can be a single family home, but is it worth more as a commercial or a multifamily unit? And if so, then the appraisal is somewhat dead in the water. So in terms of your situation in Auburn, part of that highest and best use test is determining what's physically, legally, and financially allowable in that area. And so you've got to do all that due diligence. And so I'm sure Keith has run into situations where your appraisal is being delayed because we're waiting to hear back from the building or planning department on what's allowed in that area. And so those are things that we have to check, because if we give value to anything that's not legally allowed to be there, we're screwed. But back to your question, Drew, where you've got something that's non-permitted, but if it was permitted, it would be legal, right? As long as it wasn't encroaching on the property line or anything like that. You just did a 300 square foot addition off the back of the house, and you provided the comps of non-permitted improvements. Me as the appraiser, I'd be fine. I'd be compliant. The lender accepting that appraisal will be compliant. If all those boxes check off, that's fine. But it's where you get into, or even things like, there's certain cultures that live here that they always put their stove in the kitchen to cook. You're not allowed to have a stove, or not in the kitchen, in your garage rather. You're not allowed to have a stove in your garage. And so when we go to those appraisals, we have to take our garage photo. You've got to call for that stove to be removed. And a lot of times they've even put a hood out there, they put the venting, but you're not allowed to have a stove in a garage.
That makes sense.
I think the other thing on highest and best use, which is really interesting or a great example we run into sometimes, is when the house has been converted basically to a care facility. And so you've got, you got the bedrooms, it's been converted over with more bedrooms. There's poles in the house. The garage has been converted. The kitchen's been all messed up and rearranged, right? The entry's been rearranged. There's fencing all over the place from a protection standpoint. And then you have to look at the house and say, what's the highest and best use of this house? Is it actually a residential property, or is it now a business? Because we're doing, from a lending standpoint, Fannie, Freddie, FHA, VA, we're doing residential financing, not business financing. And so that's where that highest and best use test comes in. I got a question on solar. This is one that actually I'm curious. So solar it's a data thing, right? It's kind of a data problem. There hasn't been for a long time, and I believe that there is now, but really like a box that you check in MLS for you guys to be able to sort if the property had solar or not. And I'm wondering, now we have that, but not every agent's checking it. But now that we have state mandate that all new construction has solar, how is that impacting the ability to use solar in valuation as long as it's owned?
It's still really not. It still is a lack of data. So even if you check the box and you say own solar, the appraiser needs drastically more data than just that. So we need to know the cost of the system, the size of the system, what's the output, what are at least 12 months of pre and post solar system utility bills looking like, right? So we need to be able to do a full cost analysis on that. You'd be surprised at how many times I go into a house, somebody just bought a $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 solar system, financed or paid for it cash. They can't even answer those questions. Maybe 3 or 4% can answer those questions right off the top of their head. So even the homeowner doesn't know. You take into consideration a finance system, 99% of the time cannot, nor will we give value to it because it's financed. Lease systems can't give value to its personal property. So let's just say hypothetically that somebody paid $40,000 to put a solar system on their house. I'm still not going to give it any value. I'm not going to give it value for a lot of reasons. The cost, say you put $40,000 down, you buy a solar system. Maybe your utility bill is really low, or you have no utility bill for electricity at all. By the time you realize that $40,000 back, your solar system is going to be obsolete. You're going to have to replace it. You'd be surprised at how many homes I go into that people put a solar system in, but they haven't replaced their windows. They don't have attic insulation. They don't have LED lights. They haven't done a whole house fan. They haven't done all these basic things that they can to improve the energy efficiency of their home. And while I think solar is great, I think it's a needed thing. I'm happy to see that California mandated it. I just don't, the cost to benefit ratio being worth it at this point. I was participating in a study with UC Davis for 2 years with their solar and energy efficiency expert, and we would feed each other data back and forth. And statistically, we were never able to prove that a home with a solar system sold for that much more than the similar home without a solar system. You know, when you talk to agents, the term that we hear a lot as appraisers is it'll increase the marketability of the home, but not necessarily the value. So if you take, let's just take 6 sales, model matches, 2 of them have solar, 2 of them don't, but everything else is the same. Everything else is exactly the same. Those 2 with solar, the vast majority of the time, they may sell for a little bit more, but not enough of amount that would warrant us to get enough data to make an adjustment from, right? But if you take that same situation with a pool, there's usually always a big enough difference there that you can justify that pool adjustment. But with solar, I can't think of one time where I've ever seen a home with solar that sold so much higher that it was a clear indication that the solar was worth it. And then beyond that, I do regression analysis. I have a custom built Excel spreadsheet that I can export my data from the MLS into, you know, for bedroom count, bathroom count, garage, you know, how much the value per square foot would be. And it gives you a range. And it also gives you a confidence score. And that confidence score is based on the consistency and how much data it has to aggregate. And every time you do solar, it may come out with like a $3,000 adjustment or a $5,000 or $6,000 adjustment, but the confidence score is non-existent because the data is still too slim for it. And so the agents out there, if you're getting solar listings, whether you or house with solar, maybe you put it in an attachment to the listing. It doesn't have to be the direct paperwork from the solar company, but maybe find out what the system cost. Maybe, you know, find out what the average utility bills are, and find out, you know, what the life of the system is going to be. Because for us to even get remotely close to being able to give it value, we need a whole lot more data, and we need it over a longer period of time than we have now. You know, there's just not.
I see the confusion on Drew's face.
Well, no, dude, I don't know. I'm just you're saying you've never given any value for any solar system on any home you've done an appraisal for?
No. And the few times that I did, so 10 years ago, maybe 12, when solar got big, I went out and got LEED certified. I thought I was going to, you know, get out of the gate quick and be the solar expert appraiser. And Fannie Mae actually has a green form that's meant to be used for this. And it's basically a worksheet where you develop a cap rate for it. So you find out the cost. You need a minimum of 6 months utility bills before and after the system. And you do a full-on cost analysis. Then it has a depreciation calculator. You put it in. And the 4 times that I did it, the underwriters made me remove it. So even if you can prove, so from an appraisal standpoint, we can prove things, you know, through market analysis, or we can do them through a cost analysis. And the cost analysis, lenders and underwriters are always more leery of, because it's not market-based necessarily. You're determining what the cost is. You're applying a depreciation factor to it, depending on how old it is. And you're just saying, look, based on the cost, you know, it's 7 years old. You know, solar systems on average depreciate this much per year of the life of the system. And then this is the average savings on their utility bill. You can do it that way, but underwriters really don't like it. But my point with all that too, from just a practical standpoint, is that if you're going to spend $40,000 on a solar system, that would be awesome if you're going to be in your home for 20 or 30 years, and the system would never run out of economic life. I appraised a house in Woodland this past February. Solar system was 7 years old, and the panels are already gone to shit, pardon my language, and they're having a whole new system put on. 7 years, and they paid for it outright, $30,000. And now I know that panels are getting better, the technology is getting better, but I think the technology needs to get a whole lot better, and I think the systems need to get cheaper. But then at that point, everybody's going to have them, and it'll be a moot point.
Yeah. We got about, I mean, we're at hour 55 here. I got them for an hour. I don't know if there's any kind of wrapping questions or anything you want to say, bud, just to kind of wrap it up. Anybody have any kind of final quick thoughts or quick questions on this?
I have a final thought.
Yeah.
Well,
Dude,
I have a favorite thought.
Your camera is so clear, dude. Is that a brand new iPhone? Is that the new one?
No.
Can you see the
11,
sushi in his teeth?
Can you see the sushi?
11, whatever the 11 thing is.
I love it. What do you got for us?
Well, I just wanted to comment. My favorite part of Levi's last statement was that he built a spreadsheet. There's like I love people that embrace their nerd nature.
Oh, I didn't build it. I had to pay somebody.
Oh, you paid a nerd to build it. No, this has been super helpful, Levi. It's great to see you. And
You too, man.
this has been really helpful. And Keith, thank you for putting it together. But yeah, it's interesting times. Thank you.
Absolutely, man. And yeah, Levi, I really appreciate you coming on and doing this. This is recorded. I'll send this over to you, and then I'll get this up and I'll send it out to everybody that if you guys want it. But hey, Levi, if they have questions, because you do independent appraisals, I've got a couple of people that do flips, like Anessa. You know, I know you do all of the appraisals for Anessa. Anessa is a Realty One agent. There's a few Realty One agents on here. And what's really cool with that is whenever she has, people asking about value, she just flips over the appraisal right to him. Right to the buying agent, and it's a local appraisal. It's very recent. So how does someone get a hold of you, man, if they have questions about approaching valuation, or need to get an independent appraisal done, or whatever, just need some help and support?
Yeah, for reasons unknown, my website is not populating, even though they charged me for it last month, so I got to look into that. The phone number is area code 707-291-8693, and then email's a little bit long, so if you need to get a hold of me, I'm sure Keith can just reach out and give you my contact info as well. Always around.
Yeah. Have everybody reach out to me. Just shoot anybody. If you guys want Levi's contact, I have it in my phone. I'll just fire it off to you. But Levi's a great appraiser. I've worked with him for years. It's super helpful. I know agents reach out to him for questions, and obviously does the independent stuff. And they probably do 9 out of 10 appraisals that we do here at Movement Mortgage. And like I said, they're an arrow in the quiver for us. I believe we get transactions done just because. Like if the appraisal comes in low, the first thing I do is look to see who the appraiser is. That's the first thing I do to see if an appraisal comes in low. And, there's certain people, if it comes in low, I'm just like, he approached it right, and we have to look at everything. Everybody has a bad day, I guess. But yeah, no, we have high confidence in him and his team. That they've always been great. So I appreciate it.
I appreciate that. And I think that's the difference of having an office where I'm not, or our appraisers aren't burdened by taking care of all the clerical work. I mean, can you imagine going to your doctor, your attorney, and he's pulling your file, he's doing all the office work for it, how inefficient they would be and how much longer it'd take them to do stuff. So when we're freed up from all that, we get to focus on the appraisal. And when you get tough appraisals, you need time to work through them, and we get paid per appraisal. So most appraisers, when it gets difficult, they just want to find the path of least resistance and get it done because they don't have the time. We have the time to work through those harder problems. And that doesn't mean that value is going to always be there, but when it's not, that report is going to be really well documented and explained.
Awesome. Thanks, man. I'm going to wrap this, guys. If you guys have any other questions for him, let me know. I can get you his contact information, but I really appreciate everybody coming out. Oh, next week. So next week you guys give me the feedback here. If this cadence every week is too much, I'm good with it. Or if you want to go to every other week, I appreciate you coming on. I'm just trying to provide value for you. But I've got Ryan Christensen coming on next week. So Ryan's a really cool guy. So he's actually a regional marketing coordinator for Movement Mortgage for the Pacific Northwest. So he supports me. He is the co-founder of a show, the RE Resource TV, which is probably the most syndicated real estate weekly video real estate show in the nation. He does all the editing for it, all the distribution from Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, does all the paid ads. He's actually the slow-mo replay editor for the Seattle Seahawks and the Sounders. The guy's like a technical genius. So he's going to come on and just talk about what agents can be doing right now from a marketing, branding, and direct lead advertising standpoint. So we're not talking Zillow, we're not talking realtor.com, but how can you actually maximize your reach with Facebook ads right now? Because that's what he does for the Real Estate Resource. So he's going to be on next week. All right, everybody. Have a blessed one. Thank you so much.
That sounds awesome, but when can we have Casey Crawford?
You want? That's a big one. That's a big ask. Casey, was everybody see the Maxwell thing yet? Dude, that thing
was amazing. That was amazing.
So good. So good. If you haven't, send me a text message. I'll get you the video on that. Casey interviewed John Maxwell, and it was all about leadership in challenging and difficult times. And Maxwell's fantastic, man. I had an opportunity to spend 3 days in Costa Rica with Casey and Maxwell. The guy's, he's like 70 years old, man. He spoke 3 times in front of 8,000 people in one day, and he's like 70 years old. The guy is just, he's amazing. So I would love to, if you guys want to watch that video, let me know. It was, I got pages and notes out of that thing. I would love to have Casey on one of those things, on one of these, but I don't know if that's going to happen, guys.